another on the returns.
Head of government of the Abkhazia autonomous.
I would say relatively on their own.
Second is an unrelated question, but it's about the politics of when. Perhaps.
That hinder the overall sustainable development in releasing, speaking to the aid.
Okay. მე ჩვენს პატივცემულ კოლეგას და ოპოზიციის წარმომადგენელს ქართულად უპასუხებ, რა თქმა უნდა. პირველ რიგში დავიწყებ ბოლოდან. მე მგონი მე ამასთან დაკავშირებით განმარტება გავაკეთე. საუბარი არის ბუნებრივად სტრატეგიული მიმოხილვის დოკუმენტზე, რომელიც აღნიშნე კიდევაც, რომ დაიწყო მუშაობა, რომელზეც წინა ხელისუფლებამ, წინა ადმინისტრაციამ ჩვენ ჩავთვალეთ საჭიროდ, რომ გაგვეგრძელებინა და ახალი დოკუმენტი არ შეგვექმნა, იმიტომ რომ თვისობრივი ცვლილებები ფუნდამენტალური არ ხდებოდა, მათ შორის საფრთხების შეფასებაშიც. პრემიერ-მინისტრმა აღნიშნა თავის გამოსვლაშიც და ჩვენ სწორედ მაგაზე გვქონდა საუბარი, რა ფორმით ჩაგვესვა ამ დოკუმენტში ახალი რეალობის აღნიშნული, ასე ვთქვათ, ინფორმაცია. კიდევ ერთხელ ვიტყვი, საფრთხეები, რომელიც გვაქვს სამწუხაროდ, რჩება საფრთხეებად, მათ შორის ოკუპირებულ ტერიტორიებზე, მაგრამ ასევე გაჩნდა ახალი რეალობა, მოლაპარაკებები სავაჭრო თემებზე, ჰუმანიტარული კონტაქტები, რაც აჩენს ფრთხილ ოპტიმიზმს, რომ რუსეთ-საქართველოს ურთიერთობების ნორმალიზების პოტენციალი არსებობს. აი ეს არის ჩანაწერი, რომელიც მე წინასწარ გეუბნები და მე მგონი თქვენ იცით, იმიტომ რომ ალბათ ნანახი გაქვთ ეს დოკუმენტი, იმიტომ პარლამენტშიც გადავაგზავნეთ. ეხლა ჯერ არ მოწერილა ხელი, რატომღაც არ ვიცი, ერთი თვეა მე მგონი უკვე იჭიმება ამ დოკუმენტზე პრეზიდენტის ხელმოწერა, თუმცა ვიცი, რომ ეროვნული უშუალობის საბჭოდან არანაირი პრობლემა ამ დოკუმენტზე არ არის და მოეწერება და გამოქვეყნდება. და თქვენ თვითონ ნახავთ, რომ ამ დოკუმენტში რა ცვლილებებით შევიდა და საზოგადოებაც ნახავს. აქედან გამომდინარე, მე საერთოდ ვერ ვხედავ ვერანაირ პრობლემას იმასთან დაკავშირებით, რაც ოპოზიციის ლიდერმა განაცხადა, თუ არ ვცდები მერაბიშვილმა, რომ დოკუმენტები შეიცვალა და აქედან გამომდინარე, რაც პასუხი უნდა გავცეთ საზოგადოებას. არაფერი საფრთხებთან დაკავშირებით არ შეცვლილი. რაც შეეხება ლოპოტას ოპერაციასთან დაკავშირებით, პრემიერ-მინისტრმა თქვა, რომ გამოძიება მიდის და გამოძიების დასრულებამდე არ უნდა გაკეთდეს წინასწარი დასკვნები. კი, არა, გამოძიება მიდის და არ უნდა გავაკეთოთ წინასწარი დასკვნები. მე განვაცხადე და კიდევ ერთხელ ვიმეორებ, რომ ჩემს ხელს არსებული ინფორმაციით ასეთი მტკიცების საფუძველი არ გვაქვს. ნახოთ გამოძიება დასრულდება და საჯაროდ გახდება ეს ინფორმაცია უკვე ცნობილი. ასე რომ რაც შეეხება კოორდინაციას, ეს მუდმივად სრულყოფა უნდა მიდიოდეს კოორდინაციის ჩვენს უწყებებს შორის, ჩვენს პარლამენტთან მთავრობის, ამაზე ხშირად არის ესეთი შეხვედრები უმრავლესობასთანაც. მე პირადად ვიყავი და კიდევ ერთხელ მრავალჯერ ჩამოვალ პარლამენტში, თუ კი თქვენ დაგჭირდებათ, განსაკუთრებით ოპოზიციასთან ძალკე შეხვდებით და აგიხსნით რა პროცესები მიმდინარეობს თავდაცვის უწყებაში, მზადა ვარ ძალიან ღიად გახსნილად ვიმუშაოთ პარლამენტთან. დიდი მადლობა. Well, first of all, thank you very much for the kind assessment of our experience. And the second, we are also very proud of our troops, what they're doing, how they're performing there. And it's always pleasant to hear the assessments from our strategic allies and friends like you are. Now, the path depends mainly on Georgia, because it's a performance-based. Of course, there's a context around us. We are in a region with a neighbor and all of this, but mainly we understand that it depends on us. This is why we are very eager to demonstrate in detail how we are transforming and reforming and making sure that continuation of these projects that were started are happening in defense and security, and also we want to demonstrate what is changing in judiciary and how we are trying, sometimes very successfully, sometimes less, in cohabitation. As I mentioned, it's a learning process. It's the first time in Georgian history this kind of thing happened. And I'm pretty sure from my standpoint that we're doing well on that. I think not mentioning what we would expect from the NATO summit next year, as I mentioned, we believe that we have full potential to qualify for the next step. We don't want to raise too much the expectations of Georgian people, which support to the NATO and European path of Georgia remains very high. Recently, there were polls conducted by NDI, IRI, and other organizations that supports this. So that's why I have full confidence when I'm saying that the path to the Europe is irreversible. We're going to make sure that during this year, as I mentioned, North Atlantic Council is coming here, then there is a security conference that Georgia is putting together in June, then other events to demonstrate the readiness and the progress and the reforms. So we're going to do our homework very hard. I'm going to do, and we're going to demonstrate this. And this is why we think that the progress will be accomplished and the acceptance will be there from the allies as well to see. What's new, I think, from this government, and also we have to take advantage, is predictability and less, in the regional context, then I'm going to go to the next question also, less potential of the possible escalation, military escalation in the region. So we have more dependable, credible, and responsible government that will demonstrate this by daily deeds. Now, the respective representative of Kazakhstan asked about the Kyrgyzstan. I'm sorry, I cannot say Kyrgyzstan. I'm sorry. Thank you. Asked about the defense posture, doctrine, or our thinking, defense thinking of Georgia. First and foremost, let me express very loudly. Georgia declared that we're not going to resolve the problem of the occupation of our lands by Russian Federation's forces through the military means. Military option is not that something that we're considering. At the same time, we need to have the defense, credible defense, that will deter the escalation. This is why we orient the forces that are light, mobile, with the more capacity for the special operations, and we're adapting our doctrine, having in mind the past experience, 2008 experience, of how the combat operations were conducted. Having said that, I want to emphasize as well that we are commissioning the lessons learned inquiry that will look at the war, how it was conducted by our side in 2008, and also other wars in the early 90s, to make certain analysis and to feed this back to the defense doctrine of Georgia. So this is why I think we're going to emphasize, as I mentioned, on a more mobile, special operations capable armed forces with the anti-tech and anti-air missile defense capabilities. This is where we stand.
Thank you. Our next two questioners are from our president, Mr. Hugh Bailey, followed by Koryun Nahapetyan from...
Let's move ahead. Well, first, about Russia. Of course, having been Minister of Defense, I cannot avoid thinking mostly daily on what's happening in occupied zones. What are their military posture? What are their capabilities, if they're building their military capabilities in a way that we can expect attack on Georgia proper. And I can say that at this point we don't have grounds to say that there is imminent threat of the armed confrontation. There is up to 10,000 troops in both occupied territories. We think our intelligence capabilities are good enough to see and predict in a timely manner if there's going to be escalation that we will find it aggressive and posture that will indicate the attack. At the same time, as I mentioned in the previous, we are working hard to have the armed forces credible enough to deter the escalation, to win time, and to make sure that the international community will be notified duly if something like 2008 is repeating itself. But as I mentioned, we don't see the imminent threat of the Russian attack. At the same time, you rightly mentioned that our position, our foreign policy goal is to make sure that there is a less and less chances for the escalation. This is why it was a very wise decision by the government and Prime Minister to appoint its special rep on the trade and humanitarian issues. We want to make sure that Russia is in a corner that they will never have pretext to attack us aggressively. politically or international sphere. So this is why our policy is to make sure we don't give them any reasons to do this. Of course, we don't have illusions that Russians will change their policy towards the territorial integrity of Georgia or our aspirations to join NATO anytime soon. I don't have any illusion anything will change there in coming 10 years. But we have to be responsible, and we are accountable for our own faith. This is why we have to be very vigilant not to give anybody the pretext to do something stupid. So this is our position on Russia. Not having illusion, but being very vigilant, not giving anybody any chances. And this is going to give us more room and more space to develop our economy, our institutions. This is going to give us more space to deal with Abkhaz and Ossetians, to talk with them, make sure they understand that we mean when we say we want to live with them together in future. And I bet the Abkhaz and Ossetians will find more interesting with Georgians to be in Europe rather than stay out of the Russian occupation all their lives. So this is a future. We're not pushing this. We need to be patient here. But this is the future as I see developing. Now, judiciary was always, people voted for us, not because there was a high prices on some social commodities. People voted for us because there was a fundamental lack of trust to justice, and there was a fundamental feeling of injustice in the country. And this is why our #1 priority is to change and switch this. And our parliament and our justice minister, together with others, are working hard to make it fixed. It's not going to be fixed overnight, we understand. The judges who were for 9 years only making decisions based on the phone call from the prosecutor general, they will not be changing mentality overnight. But we're pushing hard. We're working with them. We're working with the Supreme Court chairman. But unfortunately, the decision was made by the president to veto this legal initiative. Hopefully we're going to overcome this, and we're going to continue depoliticizing and making sure the court system and making sure it's going to be independent. Thank you.
And now the last two questions from...
I was asked to speak in English, which is not the ordinary thing while we are in Georgia, but I really want all of you to understand specifically and exactly what are the things that we're doing in the Ministry of Defense. So I accepted this kind of invitation, and thank you very much to all of you for coming to Georgia. I'm delighted to be part of it. Georgia has gone through the tremendous transformation for the past 20 years, and specifically for past years. The elections that went through last year was a very clear demonstration that the Georgians as a nation, we are the democratic nation, and we are aspiring to build the lasting democratic institutions to safeguard our freedoms and a choice. And a choice that the people made is that we want to be part of Europe, European family, the Euro-Atlantic community. That was exactly the choice the Georgian people made a few years ago on a plebiscite, more than 75%. And this is the choice that people are going through today. So the defense, Ministry of Defense, security, and defense apparatus is one of the main spheres that we are transforming to really meet the criteria that we want for Georgia to be part of Euro-Atlantic community and to meet the standards. So I would start by saying a few words about where we stand in the Ministry of Defense. And then, of course, I'm going to make a few remarks about, in general, our integration process to NATO. And, of course, then I'll be more than glad to answer any of your questions. Since we're talking with the parliamentarians, I want to make sure that we clearly give the message to you that Georgia's government in general and Ministry of Defense is putting in the culture of accountability towards its citizens and towards the parliament as well. There was a huge deficit of real instruments of accountability within our system before, and this is why we are proactively working with the Parliament of Georgia, specifically with the Defense and the Security Committee, to have the oversight, to have the scrutinizing power within the Parliament of the spendings, procurement, and in general the processes that are going through in the Ministry of Defense. We put through in a parliament the law that will require in future of the Georgian Defense Ministry to put out the very detailed report of every spending that is above 2 million and every purchase that above 4 million. So this is also in line with our declared vision of bringing accountability into Ministry of Defense and putting the parliamentary oversight in a respectful place. At the same time, we work hard with our militaries to make sure that there is a real civilian control of the armed forces. But at the same time, we respect our militaries, we trust them. This is why we divided the lines where the responsibilities of civilian minister comes and where the independence on the operational, tactical, and other planning levels rests within the Joint Chief and the militaries. The problem in the future was that politicians were involving themselves too much in decision-making in the defense. So we want to straighten that out. At the same time, we respect the institutional memory and, of course, continuation of the policies and the projects that we're going through on the defense and security field in Georgia. This is why, respecting this continuation, we also continued working on the strategic defense review that was started under the previous administration. We worked with them as well on this document, and this document is ready to be signed by the President. So it was the collective effort of the new government, the Parliament, and the administration before that this document will be out, and this document will be kind of planned for our defense and militaries to develop ourselves in the nearest 4 to 5 years. Georgia's armed forces transformed tremendously, and we respect the work that has been done by previous governments and administrations on this. At the same time, we're here to fix the problems, as I mentioned, that previous government had. So ensuring the accountability, civilian control, and parliamentary oversight is one of the first and foremost priorities that we're building through. And it's not the words. This is something that we're doing every day. We're working hard with the NGO community to make sure that information is accessible, to make sure they understand where Georgia is taking its armed forces. This is why we're establishing 3 priority areas together in working groups with the NGOs on the defense transformation and reforms, on Euro-Atlantic integration, and the human rights within the military. We're also working hard to make sure that the soldier, the officer, is in the center of our efforts. We made sure that the salaries were raised for the Afghan troops that are working hard shoulder by shoulder to your, as well, troops in Afghanistan by $300. We raised the salaries for 25% to all 89% of the servicemen and civilians in the military, because we are spending wisely, we're spending accountably. We're also looking forward to make sure that our contingency in Afghanistan has everything they need to perform the mission before 2014. While ISAF mission is drawing down, we declared that the Prime Minister made a decision to continue our mission in Afghanistan, different style, but we're going to keep our troops there because we understand how much the security of our country and security of Euro-Atlantic community depends on the success that we jointly will have in Afghanistan. This is one decision was made to work hard with the allies, with NATO allies, with the United States and others, to make sure that the necessary arrangements are in place, that our troops will continue training, equipping, and also advising Afghans. We have good bilateral cooperation in Afghan defense and security forces ourselves. At the same time, we're looking forward to the NEC meeting and a visit late June to Georgia. This is going to be the opportunity for Georgia to demonstrate how the defense reform is moving forward, what is happening in the judiciary, how the judiciary is reformed, which was one of the main problematic issues of our integration to your Atlantic community. There was a lot of questions about the judiciary, independence of the court systems, not without the grounds. We are changing this now. Our justice minister and others who are involved are working hard with the court system to make sure that justice will be served and the court system will be independent. So this is going to be the opportunity for us to demonstrate to North Atlantic Council how we are doing, how we are performing, that we are making all commitments coming through with our efforts. We are doing our homework. This is what we want to demonstrate. And we believe we have all potentials for our allies in NATO to see, watch, and assess that Georgia is credibly moving forward to its commitments and to make necessary decisions in next year's summit. We think we have full potential to be ready to make another step towards NATO. What this step will be, it's up to NATO. It's up to us. This is just two of us, NATO and Georgia. Like our soldiers, when they are wounded in a battlefield in Afghanistan, they only have each other to help, to depend. This is the same way here. Georgia and NATO has to make its own decisions without interference for the third party, specifically for those countries who are changing the borders militarily in 21st century. It's not up to them, it's up to us. That this is why we want to make sure that you understand how deep Georgia is committed to its Euro-Atlantic integration. This is why it's important for you to be here today and to listen to parliamentarians from both sides, from the opposition, from the ruling party, how they are coming together and supporting the same joint resolution as they did for our foreign policy. I want you to see how we are committed to cohabitation with the President, how we jointly work together to select the chairman of the Joint Chief, as we did a few months ago. So this is work in progress. I'm not going to say that we don't have problems. It is the first time in Georgian history that country is changing its government through the peaceful, free elections. It's the first time in our history when the popularly elected parliament put together very popular government with a popular prime minister, but the president is still representative of opposition. This is why it's a learning process, but I think, despite the narratives that were spread in Europe from the opposition, that the things are moving wrong way, no, we're making a progress. As I mentioned, see the deliveries. So this is why I'm very proud to be here and stand in front of you as a defense minister of the country who's aspiring to join NATO, who's the leader of the ministry that has very committed, very courageous troops in Afghanistan. Everybody's proud of our troops there, and we have no other choice just to be very open with you, but at the same time to be very forthcoming, for you to understand that Georgia's path to Europe is irreversible. There's nothing that happened that will change it. Governments will change. Presidents, prime ministers, defense ministers will change, but this course will never change because this is the choice of our people, which was demonstrated in past elections. Now, in a regional scale, while we are having my close friend, the Deputy Minister of Armenia here, I want to make sure that everybody understands that we are a regional player. We have ambition to be one of the leaders in the region. We're a democratic nation, as I mentioned, but we also understand the responsibilities towards our friends, strategic partners. We're working very hard with Azerbaijan, with Turkey, to make full realization of strategic projects that has started in early 90s, and we're committed to this. We're jointly working with NATO to promote the railroad that is coming through from Azerbaijan through Georgia to Turkey, also to be used in a reverse transit. But at the same time, we're blessed that we have such a historical friends and brothers like Armenians, and we think our relationship with them is exemplary. And I do hope in future that all countries of this region will join together in these multinational projects to make sure that the Georgia's surrounding and the Caucasus is developing economically, is developing infrastructurally, and everybody will benefit from these projects. Also, Georgia has this convening power between regional players also, like we are having wonderful relationship with both countries, Azerbaijan and Armenia, to play the role if we will be needed to promote this kind of cooperation. We work hard also with our friends and allies to make sure that Georgia is responsible. Georgia is predictable partner to NATO, to European Union. And I want to make sure that you also understand that we are also expecting that European countries, our allies and friends, will see the progress that is made on the ground, and the necessary decisions will be made to acknowledge this in the coming summits, whether it's going to be Vilnius or NATO summit. Now, thank you very much. I'm going to stop here, and I'm going to be more than glad to answer your questions. Thanks. Thank you. Well, about the budget. Well, there's always not enough money for the defense, and my predecessors, some of them are sitting here, they also know how tough the budgetary process is. We have the same budget that it was planned, somewhere 660 million, and we're hoping we're going to add some more additional funds to this, because we are concentrating now more on infrastructure, logistics, and education. We want to spend more on these initiatives. I don't think, well, we are working very hard bilaterally with, we have strategic partnership with the United States. There's a lot of interaction on the education and other fields. We have a lot of instruments that we are using from NATO as well on an educational kind of sphere. But I don't think it's quite a good time for us to knock on the door of Europe to ask more money. So we think we're realistic. So yes, the new government is putting more resources in agriculture, in education, in social fields, but we made sure, together with Prime Minister and other ministers, that the defense and the security is not touched. So we need to make sure, and it's ensured, I can say, that all the projects that we have in the defense will be continued. Hopefully even added some more money. Now, oversight. I mentioned that we're volunteering even proactively to put in place the mechanism of scrutinizing of defense. And we think if there's going to be more scrutinization systems and the mechanism, then we're going to be less and less susceptible to mistakes, as previous ministers were doing in procurement. Too much secrecy is a recipe for the mishandling of the finances. And we want to switch very fastly from the D- that the mark that was given to our ministry last year by the Transparency International, to most open, most transparent, and very effective ministry that deals with the procurement and finances. So we, as I mentioned, spending above 2 million and purchases above 4 million will be scrutinized. We have obligation to give the information to the special committee. By every year, we have the obligation to have full disclosure, financial, how we are spending and where we are spending. And also, there's a lot of NGO community that is working with us and with Parliament to make sure that they know where every penny is going. So I think we are already overwhelming ourselves with the transparency. There is one deputy who's on the financial side saying that we cannot go more transparent. We're going to become nudists. So we want to avoid this. But really, we are very open to the NGO community's kind of scrutinization. On the oversight, right?
Yes. Okay, our next two questions are from Ms. Ann Fotiga.
Thank you. Well, then I'm going to start with the actually last question or statement, though, that Gia Baramidze made, that yes, the wonderful thing about today's Georgian democracy is that we can disagree. And we can also try to find a common way out, which you did, parliamentarians, when you jointly voted for the resolution on foreign policy. And I hope that other issues will be also resolved through the consultations between the majority and minority. And I will always be supportive of this. Now, the regional, I'm going to start with speaking about the cohabitation is, as I mentioned, it's a work in progress. And it's quite different because you have centuries of experience of doing this. And we have just 6 months, more than that, 7 months, I guess, of cohabitation. That's why I feel that we're doing quite a good job. Not only the defense field, but other fields as well. I mean, and I do believe that the bitterness of the pre-election campaign is fading away. I mean, it's just emotions are going away now. Realism coming into majority as well to the opposition. So I think we're going to have more and more chances to demonstrate that coexistence of two forces, whether we like each other or not on a personal basis, of course, we all know each other, but politically. We have to come together on the issues of national defense, security, and foreign policy. And this is what we're demonstrating even today, I think. Now, about the military transformation and the few questions that gentleman has. Yes, we have a patient plan which we lauded in the minister's vision that by 17 we want to go fully professional. This is why, yes, we have an initiative. We're going to cut down the time of the conscript to 12 months. Eventually, year by year, it's going to depend on a lot of things like finances, but we are trying to build together the reserve system by 17 and to go fully professional. We are already 73-75% professional, and others are the conscripts. So it's not going to be that impossible, but we're going to have a lot of work to do with the finance ministry and the budgeting. So this is what we're going through now. I think it's achievable. That's why we set it as ambition goal. And human rights, yes, we had problems because it was very enclosed, secretive organizations. We don't need to there was no need to do this, but unfortunately that was the attitude. And this is why by closing down the whole system, there's no checks, there's no balance, and there was a lot of mishandling of the human rights. And we are investigating this. I'm not going to go into details. There's a lot of investigations that were performed there, and hopefully all of this will be fixed. And the good things that was done, we are giving it credit, and accomplishment that were there, we're building on it. But there was a huge problem, specifically in the military police, which was not the military police, it was political police, and we're switching this, we're reforming this. So this is why the time that we're taking on this is worthwhile spending. Now, the regional cooperation. To talk more, I think we have the regional context that nobody believed in early 90s that in this region the huge international projects like Baku-Tbilisi-Ceyhan would have been materialized, but it did through your help, through United States help. And now we're building on these successes. There's a pipeline, there's a as I mentioned, railroad is happening. We have very good cooperation with all countries except one big neighbor. But we also have our bilateral ties with Armenia, very solid. We just signed a plan a few months ago on yearly cooperation. We are exchanging information. We are exchanging the experience that we share on this field. Educational field is very important for both of us because we're transforming our armed forces from post-Soviet to the more modern and NATO standard. So this is all happening, and the same way we are having our cooperation with the Azeris and Turks. Turkish Republic is one of the greatest supporters of Georgian independence and also military experience. So we're continuing this. This is why I'm saying Georgia has a huge potential being convening power for the region. And this is why we're going to use this very wisely, I think, in the future, because this is the commodity now. This is the commodity to talk with a strategic friendship in mind and the regional security with all the actors in the region. So this is what I'm going to say on the sharing experience. Yeah, joint exercises. Yes, we are having joint exercises with the United States, with other regional powers as well. We are planning also, and Armenians are studying in our defense institutions, like we're exchanging the students in training center, in mountaineering training center we have, which has the PFP certificate. So all of this is happening. We're not just talking, we're making this happen. And hopefully we're going to expand this more in the future. Thank you.